Imagine a child waking up before the sun rises. No soft bed. No warm blanket tucked around their shoulders. No parent coming in to gently shake them awake. Just the cold stone floor beneath them, the dark sky outside, and the sound of other children stirring in the room around them. This child is 7 years old. And today is just another day. Not a hard day. Not a special day. Just a normal day. But the life of this child is unlike anything most of us have ever known. Because this child is Spartan. And in Sparta, childhood looked nothing like what we might picture when we close our eyes and think of growing up. There were no toys scattered across the floor. No afternoon naps. No soft voices telling bedtime stories. There was training, discipline, and a slow, patient kind of strength that was built day by day, year by year, from the very beginning of life. Tonight, we are going to follow one of these children. A boy, let's say, born into the city of Sparta more than 2,000 years ago. We are going to walk beside him, through his days and his nights, through his lessons and his quiet moments, and through the world that shaped him. It is a world very different from our own. But in some ways, it is also strangely familiar. So settle in now. Let your body relax. Let the day behind you fall away. Now turn your phone screen face down. Follow me now to help the channel, and relax completely. Close your eyes if you like. And let the story begin. Our story begins not with the boy himself, but before him. It begins with a decision. In Sparta, when a child was born, the father did not simply bring the baby home. He carried the newborn to a group of the city's elder men. These men would look at the child carefully. They would check whether the baby seemed healthy and strong. If the child seemed well, the father was given permission to raise him. If not, the child was taken to a wild place outside the city, a rocky hillside called the Apothetai, and left there. This sounds harsh to us now, and it was. But to the Spartans, it was simply practical. Sparta needed strong people. People who could endure. People who could survive. Weakness in their eyes was not something the city could afford to carry. But let us not dwell too long on that dark beginning. Because our boy was healthy. He was strong. And the elders nodded, and he was carried home. His mother held him. His father stood nearby, quietly proud. For the first 7 years of his life, our boy lived at home. He was raised mostly by his mother, the way most children in the ancient world were. He learned to walk on the stone floors of their simple house. He played in the narrow streets of Sparta, in the light and shade between the buildings. He watched the older boys training in the fields nearby, their movements sharp and practiced, their faces calm. He did not yet understand what that training meant. He only knew that one day he would be part of it. His mother was not soft with him, not in the way we might expect. Spartan mothers were known for their strength of character. They did not shield their children from discomfort. They did not rush to comfort every small pain. If he fell and scraped his knee, she would look at him steadily and wait. Not because she did not care, but because she was teaching him, even then, that pain was something you breathed through, something you moved past. He learned to eat simply, plain food, not too much, enough to keep the body going, but not so much that the body grew soft. He learned to sleep on a simple mat, in a simple room, without complaint. And as the years passed, and he grew taller and stronger and more curious about the world around him. The day he had always known was coming began to draw near. The day he would leave home. The day his real education would begin. When the boy turned 7, everything changed. On a morning not so different from any other, he said goodbye to his home, to his mother, to the familiar smell of the house, the sound of the street outside. He was not crying. He had been prepared for this. And in Sparta, crying was not something a boy did in public. He was taken to live with a group of other boys his age. A unit, a kind of small community, overseen by older boys and adult instructors. This system had a name. The Agoge. It was the great Spartan education, and it would last for more than a decade. The Agoge was not a school in the way we think of one. There were no desks, no books to read quietly in the afternoon. It was more like a long, slow shaping, the way a craftsman shapes metal. Not quickly, not roughly, but with patience and heat and steady pressure over time. The boys lived together, ate together, trained together, and slept together in a long shared room. The room was simple. The sleeping mats were made of reeds that the boys had to gather themselves from the riverbank. They were not given extra blankets in winter. The cold was considered part of the training. The idea was simple. If you could sleep through a cold night without complaint, you could endure a cold night on a battlefield. If you could eat a small meal and feel satisfied, you would not be slowed down by hunger when it mattered most. Every discomfort had a purpose, and slowly, the boys began to understand that. The older boys led the younger ones. They were responsible for keeping order, for making sure everyone was up in the morning, for managing the group. This taught leadership. And it taught the younger boys to follow, and to observe, and to learn. Our boy found his place in the group quickly. He was not the strongest. Not yet. But he was steady. He woke when the others woke. He ran when the others ran. He ate his small meal in silence and did not ask for more. And night after night, lying on his mat of reeds in the dark room with the other boys breathing around him, he looked up at the ceiling and felt something settle inside him. Not happiness, exactly. Not sadness. Something quieter than either of those. A kind of calm acceptance. A sense that this was where he was supposed to be. Let us slow down now and follow a single day in his life. The day begins before sunrise. The boys are woken not gently, but by the simple sound of movement. Someone rises, and that stirs the next, and soon the whole room is quietly getting up. There is no lying in. There is no slow, drowsy easing into the morning. They rise, they fold their sleeping mats, and they go outside. The air is cool. Sometimes very cold, depending on the season. The sky is still dark, or just beginning to show the very first pale line of light along the eastern hills. They run first. A long, slow run through the fields and paths around the city. Not a race. Not a sprint. Just a steady, rhythmic movement through the quiet morning. The sound of their feet on the earth is soft and even. Their breathing is controlled. Their eyes are forward. After the run, they wash. Not in warm water. In the cold river that ran near the city. The shock of the cold water was something the boys learned to accept. After a while, it became simply a sensation. Cold. Then less cold. Then just water. After washing, they ate their morning meal. The food in Sparta was famously simple. There was a dish called black broth, made from pork and blood and salt and vinegar. It was not delicious, but it was filling, and it was warm. The boys ate without talking much. They sat together on the ground, or on simple wooden benches, and they ate steadily and quietly. Then the training began. Wrestling was central to everything. The boys learned to grapple, to use their weight and balance, to find leverage in another person's movement. They also ran, often and far. Distance running was prized in Sparta, because a soldier who could run was a soldier who could pursue, or retreat, or carry a message across difficult ground. They practiced with simple weapons, throwing, catching, the basic movements that would one day become the skills of a soldier. But the training was not only physical. The boys also learned music. Not soft, gentle music for entertainment, but strong rhythmic music that could keep soldiers moving in formation, that could steady the heartbeat before a difficult moment. They learned to dance. The dances of Sparta were not elegant. They were strong and disciplined, like everything else. They learned to speak clearly and briefly. In Sparta, long speeches were not admired. A man who could say something important in few words was more respected than one who spoke at length. This way of speaking even gave us a word we still use today. We call it laconic. It comes from Laconia, the region where Sparta stood. And so the day moved forward. Training, and rest, and meals, and more training. As the afternoon light grew long and golden, the boys would often sit together in groups, talking quietly, or listening to one of the older boys or instructors tell a story. These stories were not fairy tales. They were stories of past Spartan heroes, of battles, of moments where one person held firm when everything around them was falling apart. The boys listened carefully. They stored these stories inside themselves like small, steady flames. And as the sun went down, and the air cooled, and the first stars appeared over the hills, the day wound down. They ate their evening meal. Simple, as always. They cleaned their area, folded their things neatly, and then they lay down on their reed mats in the long quiet room, with the sound of each other's breathing all around them. And sleep came, quickly and deeply, the way it always comes to those who have used their bodies fully through the day. Let us imagine a winter day now, a day when the cold is real and present. Frost on the ground in the morning, the kind that makes the grass crunch underfoot. The boys rise the same as always. There is no day off for cold weather. No extra layer provided. The same thin cloak they wore in autumn is what they have now. The run in the morning is different on a day like this. The cold air bites at the skin. The lungs ache a little with each breath. But the boys have learned something important. If you keep moving, the cold becomes manageable. The body warms itself from inside. So they run. And after the first few minutes, the ache in the lungs settles. The feet move more easily. The cold is still there, but it is no longer the most important thing. Our boy has learned to focus his attention on the ground ahead of him. One step, then the next. Not on how cold it is. Not on how far they have to go. Just the next step. And the next. This is one of the deepest lessons the Agoge teaches, and it teaches it without ever saying the words. The lesson is this: what you pay attention to is what fills your world. If you pay attention to the cold, you feel cold. If you pay attention to the movement, you feel movement. And movement is warm. By the time they reach the river for washing, the boys are flushed with effort. The cold water is still a shock, but it is a clean shock, sharp and brief. After washing, they gather and eat. The black broth is especially welcome on a cold morning. The warmth of it spreads through the chest slowly, like a small fire starting. The training on cold days is often the same as any other day. Wrestling in the open air. Running. Drills. Sometimes, in very cold or wet weather, the instructors would gather the boys in a larger covered space, and the training would shift. More talking. More storytelling. More of those laconic exercises in saying something important in very few words. One instructor would pose a situation. Not a battle, not a war, but something simpler. A decision to be made. A problem to be solved. He would look at each boy in turn and wait for an answer. The answers were judged not just on their content, but on how they were delivered. Clear voice. Steady eyes. No unnecessary words. Our boy learned to think before speaking. To feel the shape of what he wanted to say before opening his mouth. This too was a kind of training. A training of the mind to work alongside the body. As winter stretched on, the days had a certain sameness to them. Rise, run, wash, eat, train, rest, train, eat, sleep. And yet within that sameness, things were always shifting slightly. The boys were growing. Their bodies were changing. Skills that had been clumsy a month ago were becoming smooth. A wrestling hold that had taken effort to remember was now automatic. A distance that had seemed very far was now simply a distance. The long winter nights gave the boys time to talk quietly in the dark room before sleep came. Not loud talk. Soft voices. The kind of conversation that happens naturally when people have shared a hard day together. They talked about small things. About a particular instructor they respected. About a run that morning that had felt surprisingly easy. About what they wanted to eat, even though they all knew the answer would be simple food. These conversations in the dark were important. Not for the words themselves, but for the feeling they created. A sense of being part of something. Of not being alone. In the darkness of the long room, with the cold pressing in from outside and the warmth of shared breathing all around, our boy felt something he would carry with him for the rest of his life. The deep, quiet comfort of belonging. And then sleep would come. Slow and dark and soft. The frost outside. The stars very bright over the hills. The city of Sparta quiet in the night. And the long room full of sleeping boys, all of them resting, all of them growing, all of them being shaped, day by quiet day, into something they could not yet fully see. There was one part of the Spartan education that was unlike the others. It was not a training exercise. Not a run, or a wrestling match, or a lesson in speaking clearly. It was simpler than all of those. And in some ways, harder. The boys were sent, from time to time, to simply observe. To sit quietly near the older men of Sparta as they ate their evening meals together, as they talked, as they made decisions. The boys did not speak. They were not asked questions. They were not expected to participate. They were simply there, watching, listening, taking in everything they could. And they were told that if they heard something interesting, they should hold it inside them. Think about it later. Let it settle. This practice taught something that is very difficult to teach directly. It taught patience and attention. Our boy sat in those rooms many times over the years. He watched the older men speak to each other. He noticed how some men commanded attention without raising their voice. He noticed how the men who said the least were often the ones who were listened to the most. He noticed how a steady gaze could say more than a long speech. He stored these observations the way a person stores warmth. Not consciously, not in a list of rules he was trying to memorize, but quietly, in some part of him that would later know what to do with what he had seen. The Spartans understood something that is easy to forget. They understood that not all learning comes from doing. Some of the deepest learning comes from stillness, from watching, from letting what you have seen gradually become part of who you are. Back in the long room at night, our boy lay on his mat and let his mind wander back over the day. The sound of a particular man's voice. The way the room had grown quiet when the eldest among them began to speak. The smell of the meal they had served, simple and good. He was not analyzing these things. He was simply holding them. The way you might hold a smooth stone in your hand, without squeezing, just feeling its weight. Outside, the night was very still. A soft wind moved through the streets of Sparta. The torches at the edge of the training field had burned low. The hills around the city were dark shapes against a sky full of stars. And in the long room, the boys breathed slowly, in and out, all of them together, like a single quiet tide coming in and going out. Sleep was very close now. Not the heavy, sudden sleep of exhaustion. The slow, deep sleep of a body that has been well used and is now ready to rest. Our boy's eyes grew heavy. His breathing slowed. The day folded up around him like something warm and familiar. And he was gone. Down into the deep, quiet place where the body heals and the mind rests and time moves softly without asking anything of you at all. Not all of the Agoge took place inside the city walls. Sometimes the boys were sent out, into the hills, into the countryside beyond Sparta. These were not holidays. They were not camping trips in the pleasant sense. They were tests of self-sufficiency. The boys went out with very little, sometimes almost nothing. A cloak, whatever they could find to eat along the way. They were expected to manage, to navigate, to feed themselves from the land if necessary. Our boy went on several of these journeys over the years. He learned to read the landscape, to notice where water might be found, to identify plants that were safe to eat and those that were not. He learned to move quietly through open ground, to use the shape of the hills to understand direction, to read the light and know roughly what time of day it was. These were practical skills, skills that a soldier would need, skills that anyone far from home would need. But they were also something else. They were invitations to be alone with the world. Out in the hills, away from the group, our boy felt something he rarely felt inside the city. Stillness. A particular kind of stillness that comes from being small in a large landscape. The hills rolled out around him in every direction. The sky above was wide and open. The only sounds were wind and birds and the soft crunch of his own footsteps on the earth. He was not lonely. He had been trained not to find solitude threatening. He was simply present in the way that is only possible when there is nothing else demanding your attention. He walked through the hills and felt the sun on his face and the ground under his feet and the air moving around him. Eate guatefond. He drank from a stream, careful and clean. He rested when his body asked for rest, and moved again when it was ready. And at night, he lay down in the open, under the enormous sky, and looked up at the stars. There were so many of them, spread across the darkness in their great slow river of light. The same stars that had hung above this land long before Sparta existed, and would hang above it long after. He did not feel small, looking at them. He felt held, part of something much larger than any one person, or any one city. He slept well on those nights. The ground beneath him was hard, but his body had long since learned to find rest wherever it was offered. The cold air was clean. The sounds of the night were gentle. Insects, queen, the occasional distant sound of an animal moving through the brush, and the stars turned slowly overhead, patient and countless, as they always have. He woke in the gray light before sunrise, stiff and rested at the same time, and he rose and began again. The years passed the way years do in a life lived fully. Not quickly, not slowly, but steadily. One season following another. Our boy grew. His body stretched and strengthened. His voice deepened. The skills that had once required effort became second nature. He moved through the ranks of the Agoge, from the youngest group, always watching and learning from those above, to the middle years, where he was now one of those being watched and learned from. This shift was gradual, but he felt it. He felt it when a younger boy looked to him for guidance, when an instructor stepped back and let him lead a training exercise, when his own voice sounded, unexpectedly, like something worth listening to. He was not arrogant about this. The Agoge had trained that out of him. Arrogance was considered weakness. A man who thought too highly of himself was a man who could be surprised. What replaced arrogance was something quieter. Confidence, maybe, but not the loud kind. The kind that does not need to announce itself. He had been tested in many ways by now. Cold and heat, hunger and effort, solitude and the company of others. He had failed sometimes, made mistakes, lost a wrestling match to someone he thought he should have beaten, stumbled on a difficult run. And he had learned, slowly, that failure was not the end of anything. It was simply information. A message from the world that said, here is where you are not yet strong enough. Here is where more work is needed. He took that message without resentment. He went back to work. This, perhaps more than anything else, was the deepest thing the Agoge gave him. Not the running, not the wrestling, not even the training in weapons or tactics. It was this, the to receive difficulty without being broken by it. To look at a hard thing and feel, not dread, but a calm kind of readiness. As he grew older, the training became more complex. More responsibility was placed on the older boys. They were expected not just to perform well themselves, but to help those younger than them find their footing. Our boy found that he enjoyed this, not in a way he would have said out loud, but quietly inside. He found satisfaction in watching a younger boy finally get a wrestling hold right after struggling with it for weeks. He understood, then, something the instructors had always known, that teaching is a kind of learning, that explaining something to someone else forces you to understand it more deeply yourself. The years of the Agoge were long. But looking back, even then, he would not have called them hard. Hard was too simple a word. They were shaping, the way the river shapes the stone, not by force, but by steady patient presence. Let us come now to an evening, not a special evening, not a night before some great event, just a quiet evening, somewhere in the middle of his years in the Agoge. The training for the day is done. The meal has been eaten. The long room is settling into its nighttime quiet. Outside, the sky has moved through its evening colors. The deep blue of dusk has come, and in it, the first stars are beginning to appear. Our boy sits near the doorway of the long room, not quite inside, not quite outside. He is not thinking about anything in particular. He is just sitting, watching the stars come out one by one. This is something he has always loved, though he would not have used that word for it. Loved was perhaps too soft a word for Sparta. But he comes to this spot, whenever the evening allows it, and sits, and watches the sky. There is something in the steadiness of the stars that steadies him too. He has been told that soldiers navigated by these stars, that they could read direction and season and time from the patterns overhead. He has learned some of this. But that is not why he comes here. He comes because the sky is very large and very quiet, and sitting beneath it makes the day feel finished, completed. Behind him, the sounds of the room are soft. Low voices. Someone shifting on their mat. The sound of deep, steady breathing from those who are already asleep. The night air is cool on his face. Not uncomfortably cold. Just cool. He breathes it in slowly. Holds it. Lets it go. The stars are very bright tonight. The kind of night where there are no clouds and the darkness is deep and clean, and the light of each star seems to reach all the way down to where he is sitting. He thinks, briefly, of his mother, of the house he grew up in, the smell of it, the particular quality of light in the afternoon through the narrow window. He does not feel sad. He feels something gentler than sadness, a kind of warmth toward the past, a recognition that those early years were part of what made this possible. He looks at the stars for a while longer. Then he rises, slowly, and goes inside. He finds his mat. He lies down. Around him, the room breathes in its slow collective rhythm. His eyes close. The day is behind him. The night is here. And the stars outside go on turning, slow and patient, as they always have. In the deepest part of the night, the city of Sparta is very still. The fires at the edge of the training fields have burned down to coals. The streets are empty. The hills around the city are dark and quiet. Inside the long room, the boys are all asleep. Their breathing fills the room with a soft, slow sound. In and out. In and out. A tide that rises and falls without effort, without thought. Our boy is somewhere in the middle of a deep sleep. His body, which has worked hard through the day, is resting fully now. His muscles, which have wrestled and run and lifted, are quietly repairing themselves. This is what the body does at night. While the mind is still, the body does its quiet work. It is perhaps the most important training of all, this nightly rest. Without it, none of the other training would hold. The Spartans understood the body. They understood that strength is not built only through effort. It is built through effort and then through rest, through doing and then through stillness. The still hours of the night are when the doing becomes the being, when the miles run become legs that are stronger, when the holds practiced become arms that remember without being told. Outside, a soft wind moves through Sparta. It moves along the empty streets, past the doorways of houses, through the training fields, up into the dark hills. The grass on the hills bends very slightly and then is still again. The stars above are very bright. They have been there all through the night, of course, patient and constant, not needing to be seen to continue their slow turning. In the long room, someone stirs slightly in their sleep, turns, settles again, and the breathing of the room continues. In and out, soft, even, unhurried. The night holds everything gently. The city, the hills, the long room and the boys inside it. It asks nothing of them now. It only asks them to rest. And they do. Let the story soften now. Let the images grow quieter, the way they do when sleep is very close. The long room. The reed mats on the cool stone floor. The sound of steady breathing all around. The stars outside, turning slowly in the deep dark sky. Our boy is deep in his sleep now. His face is calm. His hands are open at his sides. The day is very far away. The training, the running, the cold water, the simple food. All of it is distant now, dissolving into the soft darkness. What remains is only this: the warmth of rest, the weight of a body that has done what it needed to do and is now still, the slow, even rhythm of breathing, in and out, in and out. Somewhere in the city, a dog is quiet. The wind has stopped. The coals have gone dark. Everything is resting. The hills rest. The fields rest. The river rests, moving quietly in its slow and steady way. The stars rest, though they go on turning, patient as always, above the sleeping world. And you, listener, you have walked a long way tonight. You have felt the cold morning air on your face. You have run through the gray light before sunrise. You have eaten your simple meal and trained and watched and learned. You have sat by the doorway and watched the stars come out, one by one. And now the night has you. Softly, completely, let your body be heavy. Let your breathing slow. Let the stars turn above you, patient and bright, while you rest. The long room is quiet. The city is quiet. The hills are quiet. And you are very, very still. The night is wide, and warm, and long, and it is asking nothing of you now. Only this: rest. Just rest. Breathe in and out. The stars, the quiet, the long, slow night, carrying you gently down